Hello, everyone. It's fresh from the Warcraft Direct. I'm here, Taliesin, with game director Ian Hazzikostas and assistant lead quest designer Mark Kelada. Hello, guys.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
Oh.
Okay, so we've just watched the Warcraft Direct, which was emotional, it was startling, it was revelatory. I'm sure you will forgive me if I have to ask you about player housing. There was a time, I think about 6 years ago, me and Evie came to Blizzard HQ for the 8.2 summit for the Rise of Nazjatar, and had the pleasure of meeting you, Ian, and I remember being a bit cheeky and asking you, is player housing ever going to be a thing that you do? Is it something, that is feasible? Will it ever happen in World of Warcraft? And you looked me in the eye, you probably remember this, and you said, it is something we are working on. And there have been many times in the past few years where I've thought to myself, he was lying to me.
I would never.
I've got to ask you.
Unless I had a really good secret.
Were you actually working on it at the time, or what's the process been on that?
Working is a nebulous term. I think at the time we knew for sure that we wanted to do it. There were real concrete pitches in internal circulation. It's not a new idea, obviously, right? The general topic of player housing is something that has come up off and on, for really about as long as WoW has been around. I think actually 10 years ago and a day, we launched Warlords of Draenor. I remember doing a lot of is Garrison's player housing interviews around the time. But I think, we knew that to do it, we were going to need to do it right. We needed to do something that felt worthy of World of Warcraft and felt like a reasonable entry into the MMO genre at this, sort of mature stage with many other great examples to be inspired by. But we also needed to, build a lot of the tech underpinnings that would allow it to work the way we wanted to. And so it was the sort of feature that was never going to fit within the development time of a single expansion. But yeah, at long last, it will be coming in Midnight. No, we don't have much more to say about it right now. We just wanted to let people know that it existed. Hopefully kick off, as has already happened in the last couple days, kick off some conversations about what people are hoping to see from it, expecting to see from it, hoping they don't see from it, to help us guide our instincts and the further development of the feature. But we will have a lot more to share over the course of the year ahead, and can't wait to roll it out for players at Midnight.
Would you say that you are open to a lot of suggestions and feedback when it comes to player housing at the moment?
Absolutely. I would say we're open to a lot of suggestions and feedback when it comes to World of Warcraft at the moment, but even more so an in development feature where, I think one of the biggest moments of anxiety is something when we've been working on something, behind closed doors for a long time, and we start to pull back the curtain. We think we're on the right track. We think we're doing something that's going to resonate with players, but we never know for sure until we see reactions. And so I think we're, trying to hedge a little bit here, frankly, and obviously want to build excitement, but also get some of those thoughts and feedback early on to make sure we're on the right track. And we'll have a lot more to share starting early next year. Right now our focus is War Within, but we'll be at Midnight before you know it.
And I'm sure the community will be forthcoming in feedback for that. And speaking of hedging, I'm not going to waste this interview asking you stuff about player housing, because I know it's not something which there's even going to be much set in concrete. So because you mentioned garrisons there, and obviously a lot of minds go straight to that when you mention player housing in WoW. And I think people will be interested to hear your views on what lessons you learned from garrisons in WoD in terms of their design and application, and what you might try to avoid.
I think briefly there, one of the big ones obviously was, I think, the risk of being in a personal instanced environment detracting from the social feeling of the world. And that's something that I think we knew from the very outset was going to be a big challenge we would have to solve and really design around in a core way to make sure that any system we did felt social as opposed to asocial. Then the other one is probably, from the garrisons broadly, I think that they were never aiming to be housing. They were, a riff on the Warcraft base fantasy of you were leading an expedition and setting up a military base to wage war against the Iron Horde in Draenor. But it also, obviously, as everyone knows, provided quite a bit in the way of player power and rewards and things that could distort gameplay more broadly. Again, we'll have a lot more to say about housing down the line. I can say pretty clearly it's not a player power feature. That's not what we're aiming to do here.
And just to ask an obvious kind of like headline question as well, in the sneak peek video that we saw of it, it was very explicitly like a very cool Stormwindy Alliance-y house, which has obviously got some Horde players concerned. Can you confirm that that won't be the only option?
Yeah, there'll be more than Stormwind. And as always with all features these days, again, I think I'll say this. Let's move on to other topics after this because Mark has a ton of awesome Undermine stuff to share. But as with all features these days, it's the foundation for building in the future, right? So warbands, as we've seen in War Within, are ripping out the character-based underpinnings of the game, replacing them with account-wide ones, but we're going to continue to build and layer features upon that. The other thing I can promise about housing in Midnight is that it will be the beginning of a long arc and evolving feature and not just a one-off single expansion feature.
I'll probably cut this bit, but sorry for having to ask you so many questions about that because I know obviously you can't really say anything, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't. So apologies
Absolutely.
for that. Awesome. So we are looking a lot at 11.1 and Undermine. A lot of speculation online at the moment that you call the patch Undermined because of the data mining that maybe uncovered that a little bit earlier. Which I would not expect you to confirm or deny. I've got to admit that I've never been a huge Goblin fan in World of Warcraft. Until the War Within, where frankly, every kind of interaction I've had with goblins has been an absolute joy, and it feels like maybe the questing team and the writing team is kind of approaching them in a slightly different way. This expansion, presumably with this patch in mind and beyond. Mark, is there any truth in that? How have you kind of changed how you approach goblins in this expansion?
So is there any truth in that? Yes, a resounding yes. Is when we were approaching putting like even goblins in the ringing deeps and just anywhere in there where you interacted with them, there was a very big effort to make sure that we were giving goblins more than just the whimsy and sort of the zany and the explosion, but what is it that makes them relatable and something you can connect to. I think the feeling of people not really know, like, of course, I was paying attention to a lot of the things that were out there, both the memes and sort of like the feedback that was coming in. And a lot of the things that people were saying were things that I even felt as one of the people that was working with our awesome narrative partners. So I was working with a couple buddies, Raph and Justin, and then we're working with our StoryCorps folks. And so it was like Chris and Taryn primarily, and we were all coming together to be like, what is a version of goblins that feels World of Warcraft, but also can tell a really good story through them? And what are the things that we are okay with seeding early on? So a little bit of the names that are being dropped, some of the characters that you're seeing, some of the interactions they have with one another, and a little bit of the tension that they have there is what are the things that we can seed early so people aren't just caught off guard of, whoa, we're going to Undermine, what the heck is this? So yeah, it was a very big effort to make sure that not only consistent in tone, but give them something more that people can sort of sink their teeth into and sort of speculate and wonder what's coming in the future. So I guess TLDR, yes, very deliberate to sort of do what we did there.
Well, the opening of War Within has certainly done a great job of winning me over. Like I'm like genuinely looking forward to Cinderbrew Meadery, and those voice lines from the final boss that go throughout that dungeon. They never get old, and they should. I should be really annoyed at those lines by now, but they're just excellent. They're just so great. I look forward to them every time.
I cannot wait for you to hear the voice acting in Undermine. We're getting in like our VO lines, and it's like the city is starting to feel alive. The campaign is starting to feel alive, and it is like, holy smokes, we did it, right? It is wild to hear that stuff come through. So it's like a lot of the effort the team has put into the zone. We're starting to get that little sprinkling of like, ooh, it's almost here, right? And it's just, it's wild. I think if you like Cinderbrew Meadery, you'll feel sort of a tone and a vibe that'll carry through.
I guess as part of the story, one of the features of the zone is the 4 Goblin Cartels and the renown tracks that will be sort of available with those. What kind of form is that going to take? Because again, WoW players can't help it. A lot of mines went straight to Covenants when that was mentioned. Will it be more like that, or will it be more like the sort of the pacts with the Nerubians in Ashgahan?
I would liken it to the pacts, not to covenants. There is no player power embedded into this that is like a congratulations, you've aligned to it, you're permanently affixed to something. No. Much like pacts, right now, what we're toying with is like, is it the week where you assign yourself to a cartel within that 1 week for the warband? But we're also giving you other activities in the zone that you can do to earn reputation like you would traditionally, if we think of Pandaria as an example, or any other expansion that we've had or classic with like rune cloth turn-ins. You just earn reputation as you would normally, and then you still are earning renown at the top level for the zone. So like you have the Cartel of Undermine renown, and then you have other reputations. So very much not covenants. Pacts would be a very apt comparison there.
I think there's
allow me to interject and just apologize collectively to everyone for the Shadowlands induced PTSD. Like how the WoW community at this point, it's like the butterfly meme. Like, is this covenants? No, it's not covenants. We're just adding some flavor and variety to your experience. We're not going to lock you into a power-defining choice.
I would love to say I wouldn't have called it PTSD, but I think I have in the past called it PTSD. So yeah, that's really good to hear. Thank you. I think like thematically, there's something really fun about the idea of, really pledging your allegiance to this Goblin Cartel 1 week and then just doing another one the next week. And it fits. It's good. It's kind of backstabby. It's nice. One of the perks of the renown, I guess, is going to be the car, the D.R.I.V.E system, the D.R.I.V.E system. I cannot wait to find out what that an acronym is for to get around the zone. I'm assuming that means there's going to be no flying in the Undermine when we first get there?
That would be correct. So Undermine itself, the primary mode of transportation will be the car. Now, I do want to let you know, too, the car, not only is it customizable, but one of the things that it does is, I think, 3 to 5 times faster than your normal ground mount at base when it reaches top speed. And then you can have it go, I think, 10% faster if you're somehow able to magically hit the magic, like hold your speed, press the boost at the right time, etc., than like your drag or your sky riding mount at full motion. So yeah, you hear no flying and you have an idea, but I don't think you understand how fast like the car will be within the city of Undermine. It is very quick. And then we go out to other locations within the campaign and sort of what we send you out for other sort of repeatables and game activities. And in those places, you'll still be able to skyride. So for Undermine specifically, it'll be the car, and there's a very good reason for it. I think once PTR goes out and you start to see it and play around with it, of course, we want to hear your feedback in terms of how it feels, how it handles, what are the things that you're excited about, and then you can still skyride anywhere else within sort of like the Kaz Algar experience that we'll have for you.
Would you say?
Yeah, and just to be clear, you mentioned available up front. Yeah, like Undermine is not a flyable area. Really, it's a more dense urban space. We knew from the outset that it was not going to be a place that was well suited to skywriting, but we wanted to make sure the players could get around very quickly with just a ton of speed, ton of freedom, and I think a lot of flair, which I think led to the development of this system that is just a ton of fun. And look forward to the races and more.
Would you say that you approached it in a similar way that you approach skywriding, where it's almost like a kind of a mini game in itself, and it kind of gamifies the transport in WoW a bit more? So
I think it's a big part of the goal. It's a lot of lessons learned from developing skywriting. Like, let's just make navigation, getting from point A to point B, fun and dynamic.
You still want to use like your regular ground mount, I'll say. You can still use it. Isn't like, oh, we're restricting your ground mount from there, and not at all. So if you want to ride on Invincible or, whatever else, please go for it. But I think once people get into the car, they'll understand exactly as you said, right? It's like, how do we turn navigation into like something that you're interacting with instead of, press the auto run and point yourself in the direction that you're trying to go to, and I'll end up there when I end up there.
I think that's great. And also, like, genuinely, I think it will be a very small percentage of players, but those small percentage of players that will want to use ground mounts on there will really appreciate being allowed to as well. So for their own reasons, which is terrific. If we are comparing this to skywriding in some strange way, of course, absolute triumph in the final Dragonflight raid of having a skywriding boss fight, which included skywriding and Dawnbreaker, I maintain, unironically, is one of the greatest dungeons in Warcraft history, like utilizing the skywriding there. Is there a chance that the new drive system could be used in the upcoming Undermine raid, or possibly in a later kind of instance or dungeon or something?
I think I would say so. I think possibly in a later experience, if and where it makes sense. Certainly something goblin themed. I think one of the keys with skywriting is that we didn't incorporate it fully into an encounter mechanic until late in Dragonflight, when we really understood and had confidence in the underpinnings. This is an awesome system, but I think we don't necessarily want to lead with making it quite as load bearing as being a central encounter mechanic entails. Let's start off with having this just be a really fun way to get around, and then customize that experience and race and just enjoy being in the streets of Undermine.
It suddenly occurs to me, talking about the Goblin Cartels, that I'm pretty sure I'm hated by at least one of them. Is that one of the cartels present in the Undermine, and will that be reflected? I mean, I'm gonna have to start from beyond, like below zero with them, or what's gonna happen?
The answer there is no. Things work. You don't have to worry about
They've
your
forgotten
reputation me. Well, Undermine is a little different. We'll explain it as you go through the campaign. Things work a little differently in Undermine. Each of the cartels, yes. So Venture Co, not really a cartel, but a cartel. So we have the 4 big ones. So Bilgewater, Blackwater, Steamweedle, and Venture Co. And so you can choose one of those, but your reputation from previous misgivings, maybe in Booty Bay or whatnot, will not be something that impact you negatively when you're in Undermine.
That's good. I wouldn't want to have to wait for my car or anything like that. You mentioned 2 new delves in Undermine as well, but you also mentioned a sort of a Zekvir equivalent. Is that on top of the 2 delves, or is that one of them?
Yes. In addition to that, so I think that's kind of the structure for season 2. It's a couple new delves that are in the zone that we're going to, some additional variations of gameplay that are more goblin themed in the existing season 1 delves, and a new ultimate villain to face off against at the end of your progression.
Sounds awesome. Okay, cool. And also, when it comes to delves, I seem to recall in the build up to the expansion, devs saying that there was planned to be a different delve companion each season. So I think a lot of players are expecting Brann to swap out for someone else this season. It doesn't sound like that's happening, and we're just expanding on Brann.
Yes, exactly. I think full transparency, when I was presenting delves at BlizzCon a year ago, I think we had this idea of seasonal companions that would change season over season in mind. Then I think earlier this year, as we kind of got into the process of starting to build out season 2 of delves, and we began to think through the design challenges of how exactly that would work. Players have leveled up Brann and are used to having all of the perks of a strong Brann with all of the things you've unlocked for him. And if we're replacing him with someone new, does that instantly just feel like a sort of bad borrowed power setback, where you're now having a harder time in delves that you were doing just fine last week? If the new companion comes fully unlocked, then what is even the point there? And so I think what we just landed on was like, look, Brann works. Let's continue to expand the options that he has available. New curios for him to equip that are goblin themed. We're actually adding a 3rd spec to Brann. So you'll be able to spec Brann to tank if you want. I think particularly for healers who are looking to be able to do a bit more of their core role gameplay, especially if they're solo or duoing. That should be another fun option to flesh out your capabilities there. But otherwise, the plan is to stick with Brann as your War Within companion. There will be a new delve companion for Midnight, but for War Within, Brann's your guy.
I'm not going to spoil too much about what the delve team is doing, but also Brann will show change in terms of like how we present him narratively, right? Through like the experience with Brann will be slightly different, and you'll start to notice things that, oh, this is season 1 Brann, what has happened to him in season 2, and kind of like allow us to also build on that sort of like, he's a companion, right? He's with you through sort of the delving experience. What can we do to also make him like, oh, here he is as a character and being built? So
that actually sounds really, really neat. I look forward to sort of seeing how you play with that. I just wish I'd known, because I'd have been much nicer to Brann all this time if I'd known that he was coming along again. Like the design of the delves seems to take like the sort of casino looking vibe from the raid, which looks awesome, by the way. Like the design of the raid in particular, the zone looks great, but the raid looks so neon and like so shiny and so many colors. There are obviously 8 bosses in that raid, and I did a quick check through my dungeon journal, and this is the first time that a second major raid in WoW has ever had as few as 8 bosses since about Mists of Pandaria, when the whole structure was completely different. So, what's the thinking behind that, or was there any thinking at all?
I mean, there's always a little bit of thinking. I think in the exact boss count comes down to the layout of the space that we're building, the list of people that feels natural, enemies that it feels natural for us to want to fight there. I will say that we've probably moved a little bit away as a team from trying to push really large raids. I will say it's a lesson. Like when I became lead encounter designer in Mists of Pandaria for the first time, and I was at the time like I took the smaller size of Firelands raids as a personal challenge and was like, we can make bigger raids. We're gonna make some huge raids. And like we made 12, 13, 14 boss raids over the course of Mists and like Hellfire Citadel and Warlords. And I think especially these days, players do like want more flexibility with their time. They're playing more characters. Other than the very, very, very top guilds, no one is really spending double-digit hours a week raiding anymore. Whereas a while back, that used to be the norm. That actually used to be like a casual schedule. If you're like, oh, we only raid, 12 hours a week, that meant that you were like a much more relaxed guild. And so large raids, I think, tend actually to be counterproductive to an extent. They actually can kind of feel like a barrier to entry. They force guilds to feel like they need to extend instead of re-clearing and getting their members gear because they take too much time to get back to the end. All that said, like, 8, 9, 10, something in that range, I think is what we're going to tend to look at for most, new ones. I don't think I'd expect to see 12 plus again. But I think we'd also like to down the line get back to experimenting with smaller style like Onyxia's Lair, Gruul's Lair type raids. Nothing to announce right there for Undermined, but that's kind of the team's thinking. We'd rather offer more variety than try to create these like megalith raids that are going to ask you to just spend dozens of hours going through them.
I like that reasoning, and I would tend to agree with it. I also really like that you've got a standard normal length dungeon coming in 11.1 as well. It feels like a really nice throwback, and really cool. It's going straight into the Mythic Plus season as well. I think that's awesome. I think lots of people were surprised that it wasn't a mega dungeon. We've kind of gotten used to that. Is it possible that there will be a mega dungeon at some point in this expansion, or like maybe even another single dungeon?
TBD. We'll see. I will say we would like to do another. I think we want to continue to vary our approach. I think we're always wary of things feeling too formulaic. And I know we had the like X.1.5 mega dungeon a few expansions in a row, but I think like you just said, we also missed doing standard dungeons that especially now with our Mythic Plus and season structure, it's easy to just drop a new dungeon into that pool and freshen it up that way. So I think that's something we'd like to continue to do. It's not to say that mega dungeons won't make a return in the future, but I think we like having multiple different tools in our tool belt, so to speak, and we'll pick different ones out as the occasion demands.
I'm genuinely really excited for it. Mark, just to kind of like finish off here, is there one thing that you would like to? You've kind of touched on this, but just to make it a bit more explicit, that you'd like to change about the way people think about goblins in WoW, in like as a kind of a mission statement?
Don't know if I can say a mission statement, but if I'm thinking about goblins and sort of how they've been portrayed since Cataclysm forward in World of Warcraft, and an approach not like the RTS units previously, right? So WoW forward is hopefully what people get when they experience Undermine and kind of experience goblins, is that they're zany, they're wacky, but they are creators, and they're like the same sort of people on Azeroth that you'd expect to see anywhere else. They have their heroes and their struggles and all that stuff, but like they're just awesome to be around. I think if people just want to index on sort of the crazy and zany, please, like if that's what you connect to, I'm not someone that wants to say like anything more than that's like part of their culture, right? That's core to who goblins are. But what can we do to make them like a race that people enjoy experiencing their story? Because what you mentioned, right? I think the War Within kind of turned you into a believer. That is hopefully what we're having with like everything else as we start to see goblins and then they start to be present, from like their mode of or their methods of transportation to how they handle conflict to the way that the cartels or the leaders work with each other to just sort of like how zany the city is just like they're very creative, and what can we do to sort of lean into that and like push that forward in terms of goblins as like a culture within World of Warcraft. So I guess at the end of the day, for me at least, is like give them just sort of like that more relatable story for people. Because if you just see them pop a town out of a box or attach a laser to a shark, it's like, cool, that's funny and awesome. But how do I connect to that? And sort of the things that you can also connect to while they're still blowing up something or whatever it might be. I hope that was a good answer to your question, but it's just like there's a lot there that I'm hoping people get from the story.
It's a terrific answer, thank you. And we've got to finish up. I cannot wait to see the tier sets for that season. And all of this amazing information, and we still don't know anything about the Haranir. So like, just chalk that one up, I guess. And guys, thank you so much for joining me today. So much more we could talk about for hours and hours and hours, but I look forward to seeing all the other interviews that will hopefully cover all of that. And I'll let you get to those now. Thanks very much. Cheerio.
It was great seeing you. Great chatting.